The Wizard of Oz wasn't just childhood magic, it was Hollywood's most dangerous fantasy. But behind the yellow brick road and the Technicolor dreams, it was chaos behind the curtain. Judy Garland nearly lost the role before it made her immortal. Actors were scarred by toxic makeup, and the Wicked Witch almost burned alive on set. These are 20 weird facts about The Wizard of Oz. And buried in the smoke and the sequins, the movie that defined Hollywood magic nearly vanished as a flop. This wasn't just a fairy tale, it was the story that almost died before it lived. Number 1. Dorothy Gale was supposed to be a child. In Baum's book, she was only 8 years old, and MGM wanted America's sweetheart Shirley Temple. Temple was young, famous, and adored, but when she auditioned, the producers realized the truth. Her voice simply couldn't carry the emotional power of Over the Rainbow. So the part went to 16-year-old Judy Garland, fresh from MGM's Everybody Sing. But even that choice terrified the studio. Garland didn't look like a little girl. Executives bound her chest flat, forced her onto a starvation diet of chicken soup, black coffee, and even cigarettes to control her weight. In early makeup tests, they covered her in heavy rouge and lipstick that made her look far older than Dorothy ever should. Finally, George Cukor, one of the rotating directors, stepped in. He stripped away the wig, softened her face, and told her to just be herself. That decision saved both Garland and the character. When the film opened, no one questioned her age. Children across the world saw her as one of them, swept up in the same dream. Judy wasn't Dorothy in years. She was Dorothy in heart. And in the end, that's what mattered most. Number 2. When Disney's Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs premiered in 1937, it was a phenomenon. The first feature-length animated film earned over $8 million worldwide, a fortune in Depression-era Hollywood. MGM executives panicked. If Disney could turn a fairy tale into gold, they needed their own fantasy musical to compete. So they dusted off L. Frank Baum's The Wonderful Wizard of Oz. The book was already a beloved classic, but MGM envisioned it as their answer to Disney's crown jewel: big songs, dazzling spectacle, and a wholesome heroine at its center. The green light wasn't inspired creativity, it was envy. Oz was chosen because MGM wanted a Snow White-sized hit, no matter the cost. Ironically, the movie would flop in theaters before becoming immortal on television, proving that chasing trends rarely works as planned. Number 3. The Wizard himself could have looked very different. MGM first offered the role to W.C. Fields, one of the most famous comedians of the 1930s. Fields had the perfect mix of bluster and charm, but he wanted $75,000 for the part. MGM balked at the price and walked away. Instead, the role went to character actor Frank Morgan. What began as a compromise turned into a creative triumph. Morgan didn't just play the wizard, he embodied the entire sham. He was the doorman, the coachman, and even the guard at the Emerald City gates. In total, he played 5 parts, often wearing his own clothes and props. His multiple disguises blurred into the film's central theme. Appearances are never what they seem. The wizard wasn't W.C. Fields with a drink in his hand. He was Frank Morgan, hiding in plain sight all along. Number 4. Before Margaret Hamilton cackled her way into history, the Wicked Witch of the West almost looked very different. MGM first tested actress Gail Sondergaard in elegant gowns and sparkling makeup, more like a mysterious femme fatale than a green-skinned monster. But studio executives weren't impressed. They believed witches had to be ugly to be believable. Sondergaard refused to be made grotesque and walked away from the role. Only then did MGM turn to Hamilton, a former kindergarten teacher with a sharp profile and a voice that could cut glass. The decision changed everything. Hamilton's witch terrified generations, proving that the grotesque could be unforgettable. Oz nearly gave us a glamorous enchantress. Instead, it gave us one of cinema's most iconic villains. Number 5. In Baum's novel, Dorothy's shoes weren't red at all. They were silver. But MGM wasn't making a black and white fairy tale. They were crafting one of the first Technicolor spectacles, and silver shoes against a yellow brick road just didn't shine. It was screenwriter Noel Langley who suggested the change. Ruby, he argued, would blaze across the screen, catching every beam of Technicolor light and dazzling audiences in a way no page of a book ever could. The idea was bold, but it worked. When Judy Garland clicked her heels 3 times, the scarlet sparkle burned itself into film history. The shoes became more than a prop. They were a promise of home, a symbol of hope, and one of the most recognizable images in all of cinema. Decades later, The Wiz tried restoring Dorothy's slippers to silver, but it was too late. Ruby had already become immortal, not because Baum imagined them that way, but because Technicolor demanded it. The yellow brick road may have led Dorothy home, but it was those ruby slippers that carried her into legend. Number 6. Playing the Wicked Witch of the West was far more dangerous than anyone imagined. In one of her big scenes, Margaret Hamilton was supposed to vanish in a cloud of smoke, dropping through a hidden trapdoor as fire and sparks erupted around her. But the timing failed. The trapdoor jammed, leaving her standing on stage as the pyrotechnics exploded. Her copper-based green makeup, flammable and toxic, ignited instantly. Flames scorched her face, searing her skin with second-degree burns. Her hand caught fire as well, leaving third-degree burns that took months to heal. Hamilton was rushed to the hospital, her role nearly cut short. When she returned, she flatly refused to work with fire again. But the danger wasn't over. Her stunt double, Betty Danko, later filmed a broomstick explosion. The pipe broom burst into flames beneath her, blowing her off the rig and leaving her hospitalized for weeks. On screen, the Wicked Witch cackled as if she were untouchable. Behind the curtain, she was a woman literally burning for the role and surviving it only by sheer will. Number 7. The Tin Man nearly killed his actor. Buddy Ebsen was first cast, but the metallic look came at a deadly cost. Makeup artists dusted his skin with pure aluminum powder, which he inhaled until his lungs filled with toxins. Ebsen collapsed in agony, his breathing so restricted that he was rushed to the hospital. The role was recast with Jack Haley, but even he wasn't spared. The makeup was reformulated into an aluminum paste, which caused painful eye infections. Haley recovered, but the ordeal haunted him. For audiences, the Tin Man was a symbol of heart. For the men who wore the silver, it was a brush with death. Number 8. The Cowardly Lion may have danced and whimpered with ease, but Bert Lahr's costume was pure torture. It was sewn from real lion pelts, making it brutally heavy, nearly 90 pounds. Under the blazing Technicolor lights, the suit turned into a furnace. Lahr sweated so profusely inside that the costume had to be dried each night. Sometimes it was hung up, still dripping, as if the lion had melted on the spot. To keep him from overheating, assistants shoved tubes of cold air into the suit between takes, giving him brief moments of relief before the cameras rolled again. The Cowardly Lion was supposed to be weak and timid. In reality, it took staggering endurance just to stand upright in that costume. Number 9. Ray Bolger's scarecrow mask looked whimsical on screen, but wearing it was torment. The latex prosthetics were glued so tightly to his face that under the hot studio lights, they softened and fused with his skin. Every night, the mask had to be peeled away, ripping into his flesh and leaving his face raw. After months of filming, grooves remained etched into the skin around his mouth and chin. Even years later, faint lines still marked his face. Scars from playing a character who was supposed to be nothing more than straw. The role gave Bolger immortality, and it carved itself into his flesh to stay there. Number 10. The dreamy poppy field blizzard wasn't made of snow at all. MGM used asbestos, shredded into flakes that floated beautifully on camera, but were highly toxic in reality. In 1939, the health dangers of asbestos weren't widely acknowledged in Hollywood, but cast and crew were showered in it as if it were harmless. Judy Garland, the Tin Man, the Lion, and the Scarecrow all laughed and played as poisonous fibers coated their costumes and clung to their skin. The scene looks magical on screen. Behind the curtain, it was deadly theater, a reminder that even cinematic wonder can be laced with poison. Number 11. On screen, the Wicked Witch's flying monkeys were mischievous, cackling creatures swooping through the skies. But those flights were no trick of animation. They were stuntmen strapped into harnesses, suspended by piano wires over massive sound stages. And sometimes those wires snapped. More than one performer fell hard to the wooden floor, suffering broken bones and bruises while the cameras kept rolling. The studio patched up the accidents quietly, terrified that bad press could sink their already troubled production. Audiences laughed at the sight of monkeys being swatted from the air. The men behind the wings knew better. For them, each flight risked ending with a crash that was far too real. Number 12. The Wizard of Oz wasn't guided by one vision. It was chaos. Richard Thorpe started first, but his version was stiff and lifeless. Judy Garland hidden under a blonde wig, her face painted too old. MGM shut him down after just 2 weeks. George Cukor came in next, but only briefly. He stripped away the wig, softened Garland's look, and told her to simply be herself. That decision changed Dorothy forever. Then came Victor Fleming, the workhorse who finally brought drive and focus to the sprawling production. But even he didn't stay until the end. King Vidor quietly stepped in to finish the sepia-toned Kansas sequences, including Dorothy's heartfelt Over the Rainbow. What should have been a straightforward fairy tale turned into a director's relay race. And the miracle is this: despite all the chaos, Oz still feels like one seamless journey. Number 13. Victor Fleming didn't direct all of The Wizard of Oz, but his name still towers over Hollywood's golden year. Midway through production, MGM loaned him to another troubled epic, Gone with the Wind. Fleming left Judy Garland and The Yellow Brick Road behind to wrangle Clark Gable and Vivien Leigh in a film every bit as chaotic as Oz. By the end of 1939, both movies premiered as monumental events, each bearing his name in the credits. It was unprecedented. One man tied to two of the most iconic films in history, both released in the same year. He steadied a fantasy that was falling apart and delivered a Civil War epic that defined spectacle. In 1939, Victor Fleming didn't just direct movies, he reshaped cinema. Twice. Number 14. The Cowardly Lion's grand entrance was supposed to be comic relief, but Judy Garland couldn't stop laughing. Take after take, Bert Lahr roared and Garland collapsed into giggles. The crew grew impatient, so did director Victor Fleming. Finally, Fleming pulled Garland aside away from the cameras. He slapped her across the face, hard enough to shock her into silence. "Go in there and work," he ordered. By today's standards, it was abuse, plain and simple. But in 1939, it was seen as discipline. Garland returned to the set, finished the scene, and didn't laugh again. The magic stayed intact for the audience. But behind the curtain, Dorothy wasn't a carefree girl at all. She was a teenager forced into obedience with a slap. Number 15. The Wizard of Oz may look like a dream, but making it was closer to a nightmare. Filming dragged on for 6 grueling months, 6 days a week, often starting before dawn at 4 a.m. and running until 7 p.m. Actors staggered under blazing Technicolor lights that made the sets feel like ovens. Costumes weighed dozens of pounds. Makeup was toxic, hot, and suffocating. Judy Garland, still just a teenager, was pushed to exhaustion. She was forced into diets, endless rehearsals, and makeup sessions that left her raw. Early footage from first director Richard Thorpe was scrapped, showing Garland in a blonde wig and Buddy Ebsen as the original Tin Man, leaving only a few eerie stills of a version that never was. For the world, Oz was a Technicolor wonderland. For those who made it, it was 6 months of sweat, pain, and survival. A nightmare hidden behind a curtain of magic. Number 16. MGM filled Munchkin Land with more than 120 little people, transforming the set into a surreal wonderland. But behind the cheer, the treatment was unfair. Each Munchkin actor earned just $50 a week, less than half of what Terry the dog playing Toto was paid. Many performers felt ridiculed rather than respected, treated as curiosities instead of professionals. Judy Garland later remembered them fondly, but MGM's accounting made it clear. The studio valued a dog more than the very actors who gave Oz its most iconic song and dance sequence. The Land of Oz sparkled with color and joy, but behind the music, it was built on exploitation. Number 17. MGM's Wizard of Oz wasn't the first time audiences visited the Yellow Brick Road. It was just the first time the world truly remembered. Long before 1939, L. Frank Baum himself had tried to bring Oz to stage and screen. A Broadway-style stage play in 1902 became a surprise hit, mixing whimsy with vaudeville comedy. Then came silent films, a 1910 short, a 1920 feature, and even a bizarre 1914 series from Baum's own Oz film manufacturing company, which opened with a haunting logo of Princess Ozma staring out at the audience like a ghost. But these early versions were odd, fragmented, and most are now lost. The 1932 adaptation disappeared completely, surviving only in rumor. By the time MGM picked up the story, Oz had already haunted American culture for nearly 4 decades, popping up in different forms but never sticking. It wasn't until Garland's voice, Technicolor spectacle, and ruby slippers that Oz finally found its immortality. All the experiments had been stepping stones. MGM's Oz wasn't the first, it was simply the one the world could never forget. Number 18. Fans who only know MGM's film would barely recognize the Oz that L. Frank Baum first wrote in 1900. Dorothy Gale wasn't a wide-eyed brunette in braids. She was blonde and named after Baum's infant niece who had died young. Her slippers weren't ruby, they were silver, a symbol of the era's obsession with the gold versus silver debate in American politics. Even the storm was different. Baum described a cyclone, not a twisting Midwestern tornado. And the Wicked Witch? In the book, she looked nothing like Margaret Hamilton's green-skinned terror. She was a crooked old crone with just one eye, closer to folklore than Hollywood villainy. The violence was sharper too. The Tin Man decapitated wolves with his axe. The Scarecrow twisted crows' necks. The heroes killed bees in swarms and fought their way through Oz with brutal efficiency. Most striking of all, in Baum's world, Oz wasn't a dream. Dorothy really went there. MGM softened that truth into a bedtime fantasy. The book gave readers blood and certainty. The movie gave them music and dreams. Number 19. When The Wizard of Oz premiered in 1939, MGM dreamed of another Snow White-sized smash. Instead Instead, it stumbled. The film cost nearly $3 million, an astronomical budget at the time, and box office receipts barely covered it. By Hollywood standards, Oz was a disappointment, a risky experiment in Technicolor and spectacle that failed to deliver profits. It won 2 Oscars, for Best Original Song and Best Score. But even those victories couldn't erase the sting of losing Best Picture to Gone with the Wind. For years, Oz lingered as a strange, expensive fantasy that never quite hit. Then came television. In 1956, CBS broadcast the film nationwide, beaming Dorothy and Toto into 45 million homes. Families gathered in living rooms, children sang along, and suddenly Oz was reborn. The movie that faltered in theaters became a generational ritual, an annual tradition carried by TV. Oz didn't conquer the box office, it conquered time, and in doing so, became the most watched film in history. Number 20. It's impossible to imagine The Wizard of Oz without Judy Garland singing Over the Rainbow. But for a time, MGM executives wanted it gone. They thought the song slowed the movie down, and one executive even complained that it made Garland look like a farm girl singing in a barnyard. The filmmakers fought back. They knew the song wasn't just a ballad, it was Dorothy's soul on film. Test audiences proved them right, erupting with emotion when Garland sang about a place where troubles melt like lemon drops. The number stayed, and it didn't just become the film's signature moment, it became one of the most beloved songs in cinema history, winning the Oscar for Best Original Song and later being voted the greatest movie song of all time. Dorothy almost lost her voice. Instead, she found immortality. Bonus fact: Dorothy's ruby slippers weren't made of rubies at all, just sequins stitched onto felt. MGM built multiple pairs, and 4 are known to survive, but their story is stranger than fiction. In 2005, one pair was stolen from the Judy Garland Museum in Minnesota. For 13 years, they vanished into rumor and myth, sparking wild theories about who might have taken them. Then, in 2018, the FBI recovered the missing shoes in an undercover sting, returning them at last to Garland's hometown. Today, the surviving pairs are split between Washington, Los Angeles, and Minnesota. Together, they rank among the most valuable artifacts in movie history, shimmering reminders that sometimes the greatest treasures on film are just a little bit of sequins and magic. The Wizard of Oz promised a Technicolor dream, but its making was closer to a nightmare. Toxic makeup, near-fatal accidents, grueling schedules, and a teenage star pushed beyond her limits. And yet, from all that chaos, something miraculous emerged. Judy Garland's voice, the ruby slippers, the yellow brick road, images and sounds so powerful they became part of American memory. What began as a box office disappointment became the most watched film in history, broadcast into millions of homes, generation after generation. If you've ever dreamed of a place where troubles melt like lemon drops, drop a comment. Tell us what legendary film we should journey into next, because sometimes the hardest journeys leave behind the brightest trails.